if electron, if it is revolving around the nucleus in an stationary orbit, if it is stationary orbit, then what will happen, and if it is not an stationary orbit, in that case also what will happen, that we are going to discuss. So first let me take an case where I consider that if this orbit in which electron is revolving, arbitrary orbit I have taken, in this, if it is not stationary, then what will happen? So basically when electron is revolving around the nucleus, then what will happen, there will be a wave associated with this movement, like this. Like this. So when this will complete this revolution, now I can observe there is this path difference we are getting. When it is completing this one revolution, we observe a path difference. Means this wave, it is not ending at the point where it started. So because of this path difference, what will happen now, these waves, when they are combining with each other, let's say when they will complete one revolution, one wave which was already present, as I told you about those matter waves, that they will be present at that position for infinite time, if until and unless another wave comes and disturb it, right? So here some disturbance will be there, right? We will call it as interference or superimposition of wave, not interference, but I will call it as superimposition of these two waves. Now if there is path difference, now because of this path difference, what will happen? See, if both the waves they are in same phase, then constructive interference it will take place. Means when these two waves they will superimpose on each other, their amplitude it will increase. This you can understand with the example of you can understand with an example. If you understand these waves, like in our day-to-day life, you might have you might have this observation. Means if I see there is this lake or pond, let's say there is still water. Okay, in this still water, if I drop one stone here at this point, what will happen? These ripples they will get generated in this manner. Is that correct or not? These ripples they will be expanding in this direction or any direction you can take. So these ripples will generate, that you might have observed, all of you, I guess. Yes, right? Now you see, either at the same time or some other time, like when these ripples they are moving, these ripples they will move in all these directions, right? Now at the same time or at any different time when these ripples are growing, if I drop another stone here, let's say, it will also generate these ripples. Correct? So when these two come in contact with each other, what will happen in that case? This kind of observation, I guess all of you might have done, or you might have observed. Yes. So if these two combine with each other, either there will be no ripple at all, like they will destroy each other. Yes. Or what will happen when they come in contact with each other in this manner? Now what will happen? A bigger ripple that will start to form in this manner. Yes or no? How many of you have not observed this kind of phenomena, so that I could take another example? Raise your hand if you have not observed this kind of phenomena. I guess all of you have observed. Similarly, I could take another example if you want. If two guys they are holding one string, okay, and they are swirling this string or this rope in this manner, let's say, or in this particular way. Anyway, if they are swirling this string or rope, now let's say if both of them are swirling it in same direction, now this amplitude, it will always increase. Yes or no? Less work will be required to swing that string or that rope. But if both of them, they are swirling it or they are swinging it in opposite direction, one person it is swinging it in clockwise direction, another one is swinging it in anti-clockwise direction, then what will happen? This amplitude, it will decrease. Say yes or no. You might have observed at least this one, correct? So I'll clean this part. Okay, now here, so we are saying because of this part difference, if they are not in the same phase, now what will happen? Either constructive interference will take place or destructive interference will take place. Because of that, this electron, it can either move, either its energy it might decrease or its energy it might increase. Means either it can move closer to the nucleus, means in an orbit with the lower energy, or in an orbit of higher energy. Let's say I take that this move into an orbit of lower energy here, like this. Now in this orbit also, this electron, when it is revolving around the nucleus, there will be some wave associated with this one. Now we observe that when it will complete one revolution, this wave generating in the second revolution, it will be superimposing on the first wave in an exactly same manner. There is no part difference. Is that correct? It's like dropping that stone at a particular frequency, like in the time duration when this ripple reach at this point, if I drop again one stone, again it will take same time to make the ripple to reach at this particular point at the same amplitude. Again I drop another stone, another stone, another stone after the similar time intervals, right? So that ripple, it will appear like it will appear to be constant, means you won't see it to be moving, because there will be no phase difference at all. Is that correct? Any confusion, any doubt up to here? I suppose it is clear up to this particular point, right? Now out of these two orbits, which one is stationary? This one, it is not a stationary orbit. While here this one, it will be an stationary orbit with no part difference in the wave associated with that electron. Is that correct? Is that correct? Anyone having any confusion, any doubt, you just ask. So let me take this stationary orbit. If it is a stationary orbit, in that case what will happen? Do you observe that here the number of waves generated in this stationary orbit? See, if I observe that from here, one wave, two wave, three wave. The diagram is not that much clear, like here I have taken a longer length, here smaller length, like that, but consider it to be an uniform wave only. Okay, so here I observe 1 from here to here, 2 from here to here, 3 total waves, and number of waves I am getting, where n is an integer, right? While here if I observe 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4.75, let's say, or 4.6, that n is not an integer. Is that correct or not? Because of that there will be a path difference, so that will not be an stationary orbit. So if it is an stationary orbit, I say that total number of waves associated with that orbit, stationary orbit, it will be an integer or it will be an whole number. Is that correct? Any confusion, any doubt? So what we can say about this, that for a stationary orbit, we can write this 2 pi r, it will be an integer multiple of wavelength. The circumference, it will be an integer multiple of wavelength. Again I am telling you one more thing, don't get confused that sir, this is 2 pi r and this is n lambda, how they are equal to each other. I told you that wave has no physical significance. It doesn't mean that electron is having a motion in this manner. This is the wave associated with that electron, which does not have any physical significance. Is that clear? So this is not, this red color wave, it does not represent the path of that electron. Okay, so don't get confused with this particular thing. So 2 pi r will be equals to n lambda. That's what we are saying. Now lambda, according to de Broglie relation, we can write 2 pi r will be equals to n h upon p, or instead of p if I write mv. Is that fine? Now if I separate some variables, I'll obtain mvr will be equals to n h upon 2 pi. If you remember second expression in Bohr's model, that is quantization of angular momentum. From here we can prove it, and we can understand that why this angular momentum, it will be quantized. Any confusion, any doubt regarding this particular part? Is it clear? Now next, see, whenever you come across any questions related to de Broglie expression, standard formula based problems will be there, but problem being calculation of the values, that would be slightly difficult in in MSET exam or in mains exam. Direct formula based question will be there, but they will be time consuming because of calculations. You might say, sir, very lengthy calculations are there. So if you can remember formulas, or if you can remember the units, then I'll give you some important formulas which you can use in order to get direct answers. For example, that one of the formula I told you, that lambda, if I have to write, I can write 1242 divided by delta E in electron volt if it is given. So the answer lambda, it will be coming out in nanometer. Try to remember this formula. This is one of the formula I have already given you. So similar to this formula, I'll give you some important formulas here. So try to remember if you can. Some important formulas. See, basically these formulas I'll give you for some different charged particles. So wavelength associated with the charged particles, I'll start with de Broglie wavelength associated with charged particles. First one, for electron, lambda, I can write it as 12.27 divided by square root of potential through which it will be accelerated. Answer will be coming in angstroms. So in last class I gave you third question. You can solve that third question with the help of this particular formula. Any confusion, any doubt? Correct. Second one, for proton, lambda, we are doing nothing but putting the values of mass and charge, that's it, and the value of Planck's constant, and along with the units where potential difference or potential through which it will be accelerated, that we are taking in volts itself. So lambda for proton, I can write it as 0.286 divided by square root of V in angstrom. Third, for alpha particles, can you calculate the same thing for alpha particles? Lambda for alpha particle, I can write it as 0.101 divided by square root of V in angstroms, right, where V is accelerating potential in volts for these particles. Okay, try to remember these formulas. Now for non-charged particles, here I take, let's say, for neutrons, lambda, I can write it as C. It will be coming out to be h upon square root of 2 mke. That's what we are writing. So if this kinetic energy is given in electron volts, and if I put the value of h, if I put the value of mass, this value I'll be obtaining as 0.286, similar to that of proton, okay, divided by square root of kinetic energy. Again here I'll be taking this kinetic energy in terms of electron volts, angstrom. Okay, Then for any gas molecules, lambda we can write as h upon m into momentum. We have to write, right, m multiplied by urms, root mean square velocity. Okay, right now you don't need to know what is root mean square velocity, what is average velocity. Right now you might not have that idea, but when gaseous state I'll be discussing that time, I'll explain these velocities in detail. Okay, we'll talk about them and the formulas associated with the root mean square velocity. Here I know that what is the value of this root mean square velocity. This vrms or urms, I can write it as root over 3 kt by m. Okay, so this value, this wavelength, it will come out to be h upon root over 3 mkt. This is one of the important formula for wavelength associated with any moving gas molecule like oxygen or carbon dioxide or nitrogen molecule. Any gas molecule you can take, where I'll be writing h is Planck's constant, m is mass of gas molecule, k is Boltzmann constant, T is temperature in Kelvin. Okay, now this Boltzmann constant, this k value which I am writing here, I'll give you idea about this Boltzmann constant. It is basically it is nothing but gas constant for a single molecule. K basically I can write it as R upon Na. So you can define its value. R value you can if you want to take it in joules, R value you can take either in joules or in calories. I can write this value 8.314 joule.
Sir, R is 2 calories, no sir.
See the units divided by Na, 6.023 into 10 to the power 23. Or if I am not taking it in joules, you can write it in terms of, yes, in calories, 2 calories per mole per Kelvin. Units are more important, Vamshi. You have to pay attention to units also. You have to learn that, otherwise your answer it will be wrong. So this is the value of k you can define, or even if you want to write in terms of so instead of per mole it will come out for per Kelvin. Temperature to temperature it will get cancelled out. So in terms of liter atmospheric also, if you want to write 0.0821 liter atmospheric per mole per Kelvin divided by 6.023 into 10 to the power 23 particles or atoms or molecules you can define. Is that clear? Any confusion, any doubt? So you can even define relationship between joule and liter atmospheric. You can define relationship between calorie and liter atmospheric. These are units of work or energy. Is that clear? Now note down all these formulas. It will be quite important for you guys. Okay, just go through these formulas quickly, at least for the last one, because right now gaseous state has been not discussed. Remaining you can even derive by yourself. Do it quickly. Done. Now significance of this de Broglie equation is clear, that we can the wave character put some restriction on how precisely we can express the position of an electron or any other small moving particle, right? This is due to the reason that unlike particles, wave do not occupy well defined position in space and are delocalized. So that is significance, but there comes limitations also. Limitations are, first limitation, that it can only be applied for a moving object. Like we can define the wave when there will be a movement, right, associated with that matter. Whenever there will be a momentum associated with that matter, it cannot be applied for a stationary object, right? Second, this relationship cannot be applied to day-to-day life object, like a macroscopic object. It can only be applied for microscopic object. So that will be the limitation of this de Broglie equation, right? Now after that, we are going to discuss Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Now, why we needed Heisenberg uncertainty principle? First, I will talk about that, and we will understand the significance of Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Then I'll define mathematically that what is the mathematical expression for this Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Before that, we need to understand why we need that and what is the significance. Okay, so I'll clean this part, right? Now see, when Schrodinger proposed this wave equation, first when this wave equation was proposed, then Einstein and Schrodinger and other scientists, they explained that how we can define exact position or momentum or energy associated with the moving electron. They said exact position of the moving electron. So like long time back, what used to happen, that if you have discovered something, you have to publish a paper, so that other fellow scientists, they can go through that research of yours, and they can learn something new, and they can find out that whether that discovery that is correct or not. So Heisenberg, as I told you about that organization CERN, CERN, he was, I guess, head of that society. He was head of that society that time. So when this paper was published, and these guys, they said that they can define exact position or precise position of an moving electron. So everyone was quite impressed that wave mechanical model, it was quite complicated at that time in order to explain. So Heisenberg asked that, okay, you can define the exact position. If you know the velocity associated with an electron, if you know momentum associated with an electron or energy associated with that electron, you can define the position that is correct. For that, you need one particular thing. I'll ask a simple question. All of you give it a try. Okay, listen to me very carefully. Let's say there is a moving ball having velocity is equals to 10 meter per second. Okay, there is a moving ball having velocity 10 meter per second. After 3 seconds, where it will be, or after 3 seconds what is position of the ball? Anyone, can you
30 meters.
30 meters. Very good. Who was that? Suraj. 30 meters. Anyone else want to give a try? Suraj, just do one thing for me. Do me a favor. Read the question once again. Rest of you also give it a try. "30 meters." Okay.
Sir,
Hasini
will it
also.
be continuing moving even after 3 seconds?
Sorry.
For 3 seconds, the ball has moved, and you're asking the position of the ball at that time.
Uh,
At that time,
I'm asking that a ball is moving. Okay. You start the observation. The ball has velocity 10 meter per second. After 3 seconds, where it will be? Where it will be, or what is position of ball after 3 seconds? Question number 1.
So, sir, you are asking the distance traveled by the bar in 3 seconds.
Just read the question. What I'm saying. Does it say anything about distance traveled?
is equals to U plus AT.
Yes, of course. What d is equals to vt.
S
You
is
can
equal.
define. S is equals to at plus ut plus half of at square, where a is 0. Let's say yellow. Okay. So answer will be what? Anyone who wants to say the answer? Likita, what will be the answer? Just think carefully.
Oh, sir, I'm asking, do you want like position at the 3rd second where it will be, or
Yes, at 3rd second, where it will be?
of course 30 meters from initial.
From initial, yes, that is correct answer. From initial position, you can say that 30 meters away from the initial position. It could be
Yes.
at Saturn, it could be at Jupiter, it could be even at Sun. We don't know, because until and unless we know the initial position of that ball, from where it started, then only you can define its position after some time t. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Like it could be anywhere in the universe depending upon the initial position. So if you are going to define according to this wave mechanical model, they said that if we know the velocity, like I'll just clean this one. Okay, you all of you got my point, I guess, of this question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then. So here, let's say they said that if this is the moving electron, this is the actual path. Okay, now this one be expected path, means if you come to know that this is the actual path, if this electron initially is here, let's say you have incidented some beam of photon, so that it will get reflected back here. We have this either zinc sulfide screen you take, or here microscope if we have taken, in order to observe that reflected beam of photon. Okay, so if you come to know that at t is equals to 0, electron is here, its velocity has some value a, its energy has some value b, its momentum has some value c, like that. If you know all these parameters, then after some time t, you can define that whether electron will be here or here, like that you can define. This is the expected path This was the actual path. It was moving in this particular direction. So if you have observed that electron here, so and you know these parameters, so you can define its path after some time t here. Is that correct? That you can do, if you know all these parameters, and you can define the certain position of that electron. Is that correct? Like any confusion in this particular part? Every small part, it is very important, so pay attention. I'm asking again, anyone having any kind of doubt in this particular part, raise your hand, otherwise I'll move on. Okay, so basically what we are saying, that this beam of photon is incidented on this electron. The same thing Heisenberg asked, that how you will define its position. They said that if we know these parameters and we know the initial position where that electron is, and we will incident a beam of photon, it will get reflected back. We can know the initial position, and with the help of these parameters, after some time t, wherever it will be there around the nucleus, we can define its precise position. That is correct, mathematically speaking. That is correct only. So Heisenberg he put on some pressure on this particular part, that what you are doing, in order to define the initial position, you have to incident a beam of photon. Okay, so if you are incidenting the beam of photon, then only you will come to know that okay, at t equals to 0, electron was here. Now the thing is, I'll take 3-4 examples. Okay, and with the help of those examples, we will try to learn something new. Okay, you just listen to all these 4 examples properly, and you respond. Okay, now first part, there is a moving train. There is a train moving in this direction. Let's say this train, it is moving in this particular direction. Now on this moving train, if you throw a stone, half kg stone you have taken, and you throw that half kg or 300-400 gram stone on that moving train, will the path of train be deflected? Will it have any kind of deflection? All of you?
No.
Sure?
No.
It won't change path of that moving train, it won't change. But if there is a ball rolling, in this path itself again, but and you throw another ball on this moving ball of same mass, let's say they have same mass, let's say, so it has some momentum associated. Ball 1, first ball, it is having some momentum associated with that, and another ball, it will have some momentum associated with it. If they will collide with each other, so after collision they will retreat. Even if I consider an perfectly elastic collision, their path, they will change. Is that correct or not? Path of that ball, it will change. Do you agree with that? Yes or no? Will it change or not? I am just asking a simple question. It will change, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is about macroscopic objects. Now, for microscopic objects, once again, similarly, if I take a beam of photon, let's say a person is walking, okay, and these beam of photon are incidenting on this person, will the path of that person change? Like if you are walking in sunlight, let's say sun is into your right hand side, will you shift to, or will you tilt to the left hand side? Will you move in this particular direction or in this particular way? No. But if that same beam of photon, if it is incidented on particle of similar size, or even we can say of similar momentum, because mass of electron might be slightly greater but velocity is less, so energies associated with both of them, they might be similar. So if a beam of photon is incidented, let's say I just change the direction by a small manner. Let's say this is a beam of photon incidented. Okay, and it is the beam of photon reflected, and here I have taken microscope. Now this was expected path. What if it's observed path or the new path? Just let's say, right, new path. So if
If it is
this
reflected.
if this photon is incidented on this electron of similar energy or similar momentum, then we are pretty sure that path of that electron, it will change. Is that correct or not? Now certainty, like previously we said that certain or precise position of the electron can be calculated if we know these parameter. Can we do that now? Like even if we know these parameters, can we know the precise position? Because of this incidented photon beam, its momentum or energy, it will get changed, path it might change, correct? So now preciseness in its position or velocity, it might change. Now which part will change, how it will change, that I will discuss now. Up to here, is it clear? Any confusion, any doubt? All of you? I suppose not. Okay. Now here I'll give you one more example of it is not related to chemistry, but here it will help us to understand this uncertainty principle. See, minimum size particle which we can see from our naked eye, let's say, I'll write size of smallest particle which can be seen from naked eye must be equal or greater than lambda minimum by 2. Try to remember this thing, because next year when we'll be discussing colloidal state, that time it will be quite important. Okay, people, they don't explain colloidal state with the help of this particular thing. Like I'll take different examples at that time. Right now they are not relevant, so I will not be discussing them here. So here we are saying that size of smallest particle which can be seen from our naked eye should be equal or greater than lambda minimum by 2. What is lambda minimum? Lambda minimum is here. This lambda minimum is smallest wavelength which we can observe. For human beings, that is violet light, 350 nanometer. Yes or no? Correct. So I could say that a particle if size of particle is greater than 0.1 micron, equal or greater than 0.1 micron that we can see from our naked eye. Correct. That is particle range for colloidal or colloid particles. In ninth standard, you used to categorize mixtures as true solution, suspension. Third category is colloids. So colloidal particle, in true solution you used to say particle size is less than 1 nanometer. For suspension, particle size is greater than 100 nanometer, and colloid is where particle size is in between these. Right now this is not relevant for us, so I'll just clean this one. So here this is the particle which we can if any particle having size greater than this value we can observe from our naked eye. That is first thing. Now on the basis of this, you might have seen those devices which are used to check the fake currency. Like previously we used to have notes or currency, like those 1000 rupees notes, old notes. They used to contain small silver particles, silver thread kind of particle. If you observe them very closely, particularly in either ultraviolet radiation or violet light, if you incident some violet light on that note, you will observe the silver thread present in those currencies. We cannot see them from our naked eye in presence of white light. Now you might ask that, sir, why it is relevant for us? Okay, so answer for that one will be this whole part. If it is clear, so I can explain the answer, that how it is relevant for us. I'll clean this one, or let's say here. Even if we keep them under bright white light, no, we cannot see them properly. Like for that your eyes need to be very sharp better. Okay, so here let's say a small particle is there. I told you how we observe a particular object. Like if you need to see something, there must be light present on that room or in that particular area, right? If you are observing something, how you will observe that? If some wavelength, if it is some light, if it is incidenting, what will happen? It will strike to that. One second. Let's say like this, and it will get reflected back in this manner. So if if this light, if it is observed by our eyes, we can see that particle. So first thing, in order to observe something, there should be some radiation which our eyes can observe. Right now, if size of particle is very small, and the wave which we are using, now what will happen? It might not strike to that particle. So if size of that particle is very small, or we can say if it is smaller than lambda by 2, lambda by 2 means this particular part. Is that correct or not? If size of particle is smaller than that, then it is not necessary that that wave or that radiation will be incidenting on that particle and it will get reflected back. In that case, we cannot observe that particle. Again, next thing, in order to, or I'll just clean this part. No, this whole thing, I suppose it is clear to everyone. So here, in order to know the precise parameters of this particle, means if I want to know what is size or shape of this object, what I have to do, I want to know that I will incident a wave which must strike these extreme corners or extreme points of this object. Means if I am taking a very small wave, or let's say I start with very large wave, so it might strike here next wave here, if I am taking in this manner, it might strike here. If they are reflected back, I can know the parameters or the dimensions of that object, the shape of that object, correct. But if the wavelength is very large in this manner, let's say here and here, now in this case the upward wave, it can strike this object. This downward wave, let's say it is not striking. So the precise position, or sorry, precise dimension of this object might not be observed. So in order to increase the preciseness in position, what I have to do, I have to decrease the wavelength. Do you agree with this particular part or not, all of you? Here I'll write it as an star mark. I'll write,
Yes, sir.
in order to increase preciseness in position or dimension of an object, wavelength of incident light should be kept small. That is, if wavelength is small, energy of wave, it will be high. Yes or no? Lambda is inversely proportional to energy. Isn't that right? Any confusion, any doubt?
No, sir.
Very good. This is the first part, right? So if energy, let's say I consider this to be electron only.
Sir, if we consider frequency of the light is also very big, means we can get energy.
Will be high.
So
Wavelength
higher
is-
frequency can be also a condition.
All are interrelated only. That's why I have taken wavelength and energy. You can take frequency and energy. You can take frequency and wavelength, whatever you want to take. No problem with this one.
Okay, sir.
Correct. So here in this experiment, now think that if in order to increase the preciseness of this preciseness in position of this moving electron, means at t is equals to 0, I want to know the precise position of this electron. Wavelength of this photon incident, that should be very small, either X-ray or gamma ray I should use, correct. So if I am using X-ray or gamma ray, their energies will be very high, so momentum associated with those beams, that will be very high. In that case, what will happen? When there will be this collision, when this beam, it will incident on this electron, change in momentum of this electron, it will be more, means now if we have defined precise position of this electron, uncertainty in its momentum will be increased. Say yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that fine, right? So but I want precise velocity of this electron also, because if I don't know precise velocity, then I expected this electron to be here instead of this position. Let's say electron will be here. If uncertainty in velocity is also there, the observation will come out to be wrong, correct only. So second case, I'll write here, in order to increase preciseness in momentum or velocity. You can write momentum or velocity, no problem with that. Momentum of an object or of electron, wavelength or energy. Instead of wavelength, I'll just write energy of incident photon should be less or should have smaller value, which means if energy is small, wavelength will be high, will be having high value or higher value. So if wavelength is increasing, now you tell me, if wavelength is increasing again, the wavelength value is more, if wavelength value is large, preciseness in its position, it will decrease simultaneously. Is that correct or not? Any confusion, any doubt? Tell me. This part, is it clear to everyone? So now we can write that according to this Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it is impossible to measure simultaneously the exact position and exact momentum of a moving microscopic body like an electron. Statement I'll write. This also you remember. So according to Heisenberg uncertainty principle, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it is impossible to measure exact position and exact momentum of a moving microscopic body like electron. Is it clear? Any confusion, any doubt? So why we are writing microscopic body? Means we are again saying that it is significant for very small size particles. Okay, means we cannot apply this uncertainty principle for macroscopic objects. Why, how, that we will understand when we will go through this mathematical expression. Okay, so here I'll just write, according to Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it can be expressed as that there will be minimum uncertainty in multiple of position and momentum will be there. It was calculated as delta x into delta p will be equal or greater than h cross by 2, or I could even write delta x dot delta p will be equal or greater than h upon 4 pi, where delta x is uncertainty in position delta p will be uncertainty in momentum, right? H is Planck's constant. Now momentum we write as mv, so delta p I can write as m delta v plus v delta m. According to Newtonian mechanics, delta m, it will be considered to be 0. Change in mass will not be there, that we are considering right now. So delta p, it will be coming out to be m delta v. If I put this value in this expression, it will again, this expression, it will change to delta x dot delta p I can write as m delta v will be equal or greater than h upon 4 pi, or I could even write delta x dot delta v, it must be equal or greater than h upon 4 pi m. This much uncertainty will always be there. Now why it is not significant for macroscopic particles, that we will understand. Okay, so here for that, let's take one or two problems. Okay, now question number 1. Calculate uncertainty in position of a moving tennis ball of mass 100 gram with 10 meter per second velocity and given uncertainty in its velocity is let's say uncertainty is very small uncertainty. I'm taking 0.01% uncertainty in its velocity is there. Okay, second one, similar question I'll be taking. Calculate size of nucleus, size of atom I have already defined, right? What is the range of size of nucleus in terms of Fermi's size of atom or molecule? It is in terms of or in range of nanometers, right? Now I'll be writing here, calculate uncertainty in position of a moving or of an electron revolving around nucleus in first orbit of hydrogen atom having uncertainty in its velocity. Again, uncertainty in velocity I am taking as 0.01%. Get the answer quickly. There are two problems. You have 2 minutes. Start. Yes, I will upload. Your time is up. Anyone getting answer for these questions? (6.67 into 10 to the power 3). First one in position. Don't you think it is very large value? Like that makes uncertainty principle significant for a macroscopic object also, Likita. But we will say that it is not significant for macroscopic objects until and unless we take time as n dimension. Just check you are doing something wrong with the calculations. (10 to the power minus 31 meters), right? Now just imagine how small that distance will be. Just think. Okay, I'll try to explain this scenario of first question to everyone. Just think, everyone, just stop writing whatever you are doing, just stop it. Okay, so here is this tennis ball. It was moving with that velocity, and a very small uncertainty in its velocity is there. Now initially it was there. After 10 seconds it was supposed to travel 100 meters. Okay, after 100 meter, let's say there is this wall. Okay, so after 10 seconds, if I consider the ideal Sheshit, I said stop doing whatever you are doing. You don't even have to give me the answer. I gave you sufficient time. Now just listen to me. I know that mathematically you can get the answer, but let's understand the significance of that answer. Okay, so basically what we are saying, that after 10 seconds it was supposed to strike this wall. Now uncertainty in its position means after 10 seconds either it would be traveled 99, or let's say I write directly, I will write 100 plus minus that's some value 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 31 meter. After 10 seconds it will be traveled about this distance. Now A plus minus B, remember, if A is equal or greater than 100 times of B, A plus B I can write as A itself. And this distance, think of this distance, how small it is in comparison to that of 100 meter. Just imagine, means either it has already strike this wall like this here, and slightly it has exceeded this distance 100 meter, or it is just about to strike, means only difference will be this much distance. Now this much distance in comparison to that of 100 meter, or even in comparison to this tennis ball size, if I consider, let's say 7 centimeter or 10 centimeter, in comparison to 7 centimeter 10 centimeter means in comparison to size of this tennis ball itself, this value, it is so small that we can neglect this one. Means this uncertainty, it won't be significant in comparison to that of this 100 meter. Isn't that right? All of you, just imagine. I suppose you get the significance of this question number 1. Similarly, for question number 2, you try to calculate the answer. Yes, anyone getting answer for second one? You can give me answer for the second one in the doubt session. Take it as your homework, so that in next class detailed discussion on this significance part we can do again. Okay, and the part where I said that if we consider time as dimension, this uncertainty principle, it will be significant for macroscopic object also. You will give me some example for that. Okay, in the morning there is doubt session. On that WhatsApp group, you post your doubts. Okay, today most probably you'll get one more assignment. Okay, it will be in sheet, basically question bank. You try to solve questions from that sheet. Okay, so I'll stop the class here itself. I'll see you in next class. You come with your answers for these questions. Okay, thank you so much, guys. हाँ मोहित बोल.